The cold winds of the north whispered across the snowy lands of Winterfell. It was the beginning of a time that would change everything, though no one knew it yet. Robb Stark, Jon Snow, and Theon Greyjoy stood at the top of the walls, watching the riders return from a patrol. They had grown together like brothers. Robb, the young lord-to-be. Jon, the quiet bastard with a fire in his heart. And Theon, the proud ward of House Stark. But what if they had never taken separate roads? That day, Lord Eddard Stark had a serious talk with all three. The war drums hadn't begun yet, and Robert Baratheon hadn't visited Winterfell. Things were calm, and Ned could see the coming storm. "You three are strong together," he said to them, "and the North will need strength soon." He had a feeling, a father's fear, that everything would fall apart. So he made a decision that changed their paths forever. Instead of letting Jon go to the wall, Ned offered him a place in his guard, close to Robb. Theon, who often felt like an outsider, was given real duties, not just titles. And Robb? He was no longer the young wolf waiting for his crown. He began preparing, learning to rule, but not alone. The bond between the three became even stronger. Robb saw Jon as more than just a brother. He trusted him with secrets, with plans, even with power. Jon was loyal, silent, but smart. Theon, full of pride and quick words, often brought trouble, but was learning to be useful. Together, they felt complete. One day, they rode together beyond the Winterfell woods. It was supposed to be a simple hunt, but the snow started falling heavy, and they lost their way. The cold bit into their bones. They found shelter in an old broken tower, sharing food and fire. That night, they talked, not just as brothers, but as men. "I sometimes wonder what I am," Jon said quietly. "I'm not a Stark." "You are," Robb said, without thinking. "Blood or not, you're my brother." Theon chuckled, tossing a stick into the fire. "And what about me? Am I just the Greyjoy among wolves?" Robb looked at him seriously. "You're one of us. But loyalty has to be more than words." Theon didn't speak for a while. Those words stayed with him. They returned to Winterfell the next morning, cold and tired, but something had changed. Trust had grown deeper. They made a vow, not spoken aloud, but felt in their hearts, that they would not let anyone or anything tear them apart. When the news came that Jon Arryn had died, and King Robert was riding north, Ned prepared to leave for King's Landing. But this time, he didn't go alone. He took all three boys with him. "You need to see the world beyond the snow," he told them. "And I need to know you're with me." Catelyn wasn't happy, especially with Jon going along. But Ned stood firm. On the road, they faced bandits and broken bridges, but they faced it together. Robb led with heart, Jon with caution, and Theon with boldness. Each one balanced the other. They reached King's Landing as a unit, something that hadn't happened in the world they left behind. And the city was not ready for them. King's Landing smelled of smoke, sweat, and secrets. Its towers stretched high, but its streets were full of whispers and danger. The moment Robb, Jon, and Theon passed through the gates beside Lord Eddard Stark, eyes turned. Northern wolves in a lion's den. King Robert welcomed Ned with loud laughter and heavy hands. "Your sons look like they could take a whole army on their own," he joked, slapping Robb's shoulder. "Even that one," he added, nodding at Jon. "Bastard or not, he's got the Stark look." But not everyone in the court was amused. Cersei Lannister gave a cold glance, her green eyes sharp. "3 boys from the north. Sounds like a problem waiting to happen." They were given rooms in the Tower of the Hand, and from the first night the tension began. Jon didn't like the looks he got. The court whispered snow like it was a disease. Theon was fascinated by the city's pleasures, the gold, the women, the wine. Robb tried to stay focused, but it was harder every day. The South was different, cold in ways the North never could be. One evening, Jon overheard a conversation between two cloaked men in the Red Keep's halls. He didn't understand everything, but the words targeting, betrayal, and the hand stayed in his head. He told Robb and Theon. They didn't know who to trust, so they took it to Ned. "I believe you," Ned said quietly, "and that's why you three must watch and listen. But speak to no one about this." So they did. The three became silent hunters in the court, attending meetings, listening in on whispers, noticing the movements of Littlefinger, Varys, and even Seer, Jaime Lannister. Robb hated the politics. "This isn't fighting," he grumbled. "It's dancing with knives." But Jon understood. It's the only way to stay alive in this city. Theon, however, started to drift. He enjoyed the attention, the girls, the wine, the noblewomen who liked his smile. One night, he disappeared without telling the others. When he returned, he was bruised and angry. "They treated me like a joke," he spat. "Like some pet from the Iron Islands." "You walked into it," Jon snapped. "We're not here to play games." Theon almost threw a punch, but Robb stopped him. "Enough," he said. "This is what they want, to divide us. We swore, remember?" The tension didn't fade, but the bond held. Soon after, a message arrived. Bran Stark had woken up in Winterfell. But he remembered something. He had seen Jaime Lannister push him from the tower. Ned's hands shook as he read the letter. "We were right," he whispered. This changed everything. Now they had proof. Ned began to move carefully, planning to reveal the truth. But the Lannisters had already made their own moves. One night, as the city slept, guards came to the tower. But not for Ned, for Jon. He fought back with all the skill he had. Robb and Theon heard the clash and rushed in. Blood was spilled. 3 guards dead. 1 escaped. They were no longer safe. Ned made a choice that night. "We're leaving," he said. Now. But it was too late. The Red Keep closed its gates. The Queen had made her move. "Your men attacked my guards," she accused. "The Hand's bastards are now criminals." King Robert was drunk and confused. "Settle it tomorrow," he mumbled. But Cersei moved faster. She had the gold cloaks under her thumb. Robb, Jon, and Theon were trapped in enemy land. They had each other, but now they were hunted wolves. The only way out was through blood, lies, or betrayal. Jon looked at Robb. "We may not leave this place alive," Robb nodded. "Then we'll die as brothers, but not quietly." The night air in King's Landing felt thicker, heavy with danger and death. Word of the fight had spread faster than wildfire. Every shadow in the Red Keep seemed to watch Robb, Jon, and Theon. Servants stopped talking when they walked by. Guards tightened grips on their swords. The city had turned against them. But Ned Stark wasn't giving up. "We don't have much time," he said, voice low. "There's a ship in the harbor. A loyal captain who owes me a favor. We leave tonight. What about the king?" Robb asked. "He's lost in wine and lies," Ned said bitterly. "He won't save us." Jon gritted his teeth. "Then we save ourselves." As the sun dipped behind the city, the plan began. Ned would create a distraction with his remaining men. The 3 boys would slip through the back streets to the docks. It sounded simple, but nothing in King's Landing ever was. Dressed in dark cloaks, they left their chambers with only their swords and courage. The halls were quiet, too quiet. Theon's heart thudded in his chest. "I don't like this," he whispered. They were halfway to the courtyard when they heard footsteps, fast and armored. "Run," Jon hissed. They bolted through the stone corridors, ducking into kitchens, through servant paths, and down into the dark tunnels beneath the keep. But the gold cloaks were everywhere. At the edge of Flea Bottom, a group of cloaks cornered them. "You boys look lost," one sneered, drawing a blade. Robb stepped forward. "You don't want this fight." "Oh, I do," the man grinned. "Orders from the Queen." The fight was brutal. Jon's blade flashed in the moonlight, cutting down 2 men. Theon, despite his cocky nature, fought like a man who had everything to prove. Robb led them like a true commander, his sword dancing with fury. When it was over, they stood bloodied but alive. "We can't go to the docks now," Theon gasped. "They'll be waiting." "We go through the crypts," Jon said suddenly. "The old passageways under the sept. They connect to the harbor." Robb looked at him. "How do you know that?" "I listen," Jon replied simply. "When no one thinks I matter." They reached the Sept of Baelor just before midnight. The city was dark, but the sept's bells were ringing, a message. Someone had died. Inside the crypts, cold stone walls surrounded them. It was quiet, too quiet. As they moved through the tunnels, a figure appeared in the shadows. A man in black robes, face half covered. "Lord Stark sent me," the man said. "Come." They followed him without a word. But Jon kept his hand on his sword. The man led them to a hidden stair that spiraled down into a salt-scented passage. At the bottom, a wooden door opened onto a narrow pier. A small ship bobbed quietly in the water. But just as they stepped onto the dock, the trap was sprung. Dozens of crossbows appeared from the shadows. The Queen's men, cloaked and smiling. "You boys caused quite a mess," said a voice behind them. Jaime Lannister stepped out, golden armor shining even in the moonlight. "I admire it honestly. But this is where your story ends." Robb didn't move. "If you want us, come take us." Jaime laughed softly. No, not today. The Queen wants you alive." Theon muttered, "That's worse." Suddenly, a loud whistle echoed from the ship. Arrows flew, not at the boys, but at the Queen's men. Hidden archers on the masts, loyal to Ned. Chaos exploded. Robb tackled Jaime, swords clashed. Jon fought 2 guards at once, blade flashing with the rage of the north. Theon ducked behind barrels, firing crossbow bolts with deadly aim. In the madness, they reached the ship. Robb was the last to jump aboard, blood running down his arm. Jaime stood on the dock, furious, but too late. The sails went up. The sea pulled them away. King's Landing disappeared behind them, a city of secrets and fire. But the war had just begun. Jon looked at the dark waves ahead. "Where do we go now?" Robb stared into the night. "Home, we go to Winterfell. And we bring war with us." The ship rocked as it cut through the dark waters, sails full and fast with northern wind. Below deck, Robb sat with his sword across his knees, bleeding from a cut on his side. Jon was sharpening his blade, the flint whispering in the silence. Theon paced back and forth, restless and angry. "We got out," Theon muttered, "but we left your father behind." Jon's eyes lifted. "We didn't leave him. He stayed." Robb clenched his jaw. "He made a choice. He knew the risk. He bought us time." Silence followed. Each one of them felt the weight of it. Ned Stark, their father, their leader, was still in King's Landing, surrounded by enemies, maybe already dead. But the ship didn't stop. They sailed north, changing ships twice to avoid Lannister spies. Rumors were spreading, whispers in every tavern. "The North has turned against the crown," some said. "The Wolf's sons fled the city," others whispered. Gold cloaks searched every port. Ravens flew like crows before a storm. In White Harbor, the Manderleys received them with shock and fear. The North had not yet risen, but the news of Ned's arrest for treason had already reached even the smallest fishing boat. "Treason?" Robb growled. "They dare call him a traitor?" "They needed a lie," Jon said quietly. "So they made one. It was Lord Wyman Manderley who finally said it. You must go to Winterfell and call the banners. The North follows the Stark name." And so they rode. 100 men strong, then 500, then thousands. By the time they reached the gates of Winterfell, the army behind them stretched for miles. Old banners long forgotten were raised again. The Bear of Mormont, the son of Karstark, the Spear of Hornwood. The wolves were waking. Catelyn Stark stood at the gates. Her face broke when she saw them alive. She hugged Robb tight, eyes red with tears. Jon stood aside, unsure, until she looked at him. "You saved my son," she said, voice cold but steady. "For that, I thank you." Theon nodded to her. "I fought too." She stared at him. "We'll see if you keep doing that." Winterfell came alive. War councils began. Messages were sent to every corner of the north. Robb was no longer a boy. He stood in front of his people as a commander, but not a king, not yet. In the great hall, he spoke. "They call my father a traitor. They hold him in chains. I will not beg the South for his life. I will march." The room roared with approval. But one night, as snow fell quietly outside, Jon and Robb stood alone by the heart tree in the Godswood. The red leaves whispered secrets only they could hear. "If we go to war," Jon said, "we might not come back." "I know. You'll need to lead them," Jon said. "Not just as a Stark, as more." Robb looked at him. "Do you think I can?" "I wouldn't follow anyone else." Jon hesitated, then added, "But if we do this, we can't be just wolves. We must become the storm." Robb nodded. That same night, word arrived from the Riverlands. Jaime Lannister had attacked the Tullys. Catelyn's father was dying. Her brother was captured. The war had begun before they even raised their swords. And yet, something darker stirred beneath the war banners. A letter came, unsigned, delivered by a hooded rider. "Your father will be executed in 10 days. Bend the knee or watch his head fall." The hall fell into silence. Robb stood slowly. He didn't scream. He didn't cry. "We march in 5. Jon stepped forward. "And what about the Lannisters?" Robb's voice was ice. "We burn them all." The North had never seen a march like this. 30,000 men moved like a river of steel and fury, flowing south with one name on their lips, Stark. Snow turned to mud beneath the hooves. Smoke rose from forges where swords were sharpened and armor fitted. War drums echoed through valleys and hills. The wolves were coming. But inside, Robb was quiet, focused, harder than ever. Each night, he walked among the tents, listening to his men, remembering their names, hearing their fears. He was no longer just Lord Stark's heir. He was the one they looked to now, the one they would follow into fire. Jon rode beside him, a shadow in black, still quiet, still sharp. He trained with the men, spoke little, but watched everything. And when he spoke, Robb listened. Theon, however, grew restless. His pride scratched at him like a thorn under skin. "These men cheer your name, but they look at me like I don't belong," he complained. Jon didn't even glance at him. "Maybe because you keep reminding them you're not one of them." "I was raised in Winterfell." "And your heart is still at sea," Jon said coldly. "Figure out where you stand, Theon, before it's too late." But war doesn't wait for wounded pride. By the time they reached the neck, news arrived like a hammer. Ned Stark had been executed, publicly. On the steps of Beller's Sept, Robb dropped the letter. He didn't speak for hours. When he did, his voice didn't shake. They killed him like a criminal. Jon's fists clenched. For speaking the truth, Theon stared into the fire. "The Lannisters want to break us. They will learn," Robb said, rising, "that a Stark's death doesn't end a war. It starts one." He called the bannermen together under the stars. Lords and soldiers, old and young, gathered in silence. "They took my father," Robb began, "and spit on his honor. They'll want us to kneel, to beg, to forget." A murmur rippled. "But we remember," he said. "We are not southern sheep. We are wolves of the north. And we bite back." Voices rose. Fists were raised. And then it happened. Great John Umber stepped forward, sword in hand. "King in the north," he roared. The word spread like fire. "King in the north," over and over, until even the trees seemed to shout it. Robb didn't ask for a crown, but they gave it to him anyway, and in that moment the boy was gone. The young wolf was born, but war brings choices. Soon after, Robb received ravens, offers from other houses. The Baratheons wanted his loyalty. Stannis promised justice. Renly promised alliances. Robb ignored them all. "My war is not for thrones," he told Jon. "It's for our home." Yet Jon was uneasy. "What of the Night's Watch?" he asked one night. "I was meant to take the Black. Swear no crown, no land, no love." "You didn't swear it," Robb said. "You're with me now." "But I feel it pulling," Jon said, eyes distant. "Like the wall is calling me back." Robb didn't try to stop him. "Then fight this war first. We win, and you'll go north with an army behind you." Jon nodded. "And if we die?" "Then we die," Robb answered, making them remember why the north was feared. Before the first battle, they struck fast. A surprise attack on Lannister scouts near the Trident. Robb led the charge, Jon beside him. Theon killed his first knight that night, blade red to the hilt. The ground was slick with blood. The sky lit with fire, and the North won. But victory brought something else. A prisoner, Sir Jaime Lannister, captured, defeated, caged like a lion. Robb stood before him, sword drawn. "I should kill you," Robb said. Jaime just smirked. "Go ahead. Kill one lion. Another takes his place." But Robb didn't swing. "We're not like you," he said. "You kill out of pride. We kill out of purpose." That night, Jon said to him, "Mercy can be a weapon too." Robb replied, "So can patience." But deep inside he knew this war was far from over. The lion sat in chains, but the war was only sharpening its teeth. Every campfire in the north buzzed with rumors. Robb Stark had captured the King's Lair, the golden son of Tywin Lannister. A prize no one expected. Lords whispered of victory. Small folk prayed for peace. But Robb knew better. He didn't sleep much. Nights were spent studying maps, reading ravens, sharpening steel. In war, every hour not used was a weapon lost. One evening, Jon entered Robb's tent. "They've started calling you the Young Wolf," he said. Robb glanced up. "A name won't win us battles." Jon frowned. "It might win you something worse, fear." Meanwhile, Theon drank more than usual, smiling at whispers of Lannister blood and southern defeat. But when he looked in the mirror, he still saw a Greyjoy. Not a wolf, not a brother, just a borrowed son of a borrowed peace. Then came the Raven. Cersei Lannister offered terms. "Release Jaime," she wrote, "and Lord Tywin will recognize your rule in the north. Peace in exchange for mercy." The tent fell silent. Robb read the letter again. "They think I'm a boy in a crown," he said. "They think I'll trade justice for titles." Theon scoffed. "Peace sounds better than a spear in your gut." Jon's voice cut through the air. "Peace with lions is a lie with honey on top." Robb nodded. "We don't trade brothers for silence." But the letter did more than test their loyalty. It forced them to act. They had to move. Robb split his army in two. He led one force west, striking deep into Lannister lands, burning supply lines and castles. The second army, under Lord Bolton, would head south through the Riverlands, the real heart of Tywin's strength. But war changes men. In the burned ruins of Ashmark, Robb saw southern cruelty firsthand. Entire villages scorched, children nailed to trees, wolves skinned and hung from doors. Jon found a survivor, a girl no older than Arya, barely breathing. She clutched a small carved wolf in her hand. "She said the Lannisters asked her who she served," Jon whispered. "She told them. The wolf with the crown." Robb looked away. Then we bury them like kings. They began fighting not just for revenge, but for the name of the North. Every hill, every river soaked in Lannister blood was another stone laid on the path to vengeance. But Theon was fading. He watched men cheer Robb, follow Jon, whisper tales of northern pride. And he stood alone, a prince of a dying house, forgotten, untrusted. One night, he approached Robb's tent, eyes filled with something dangerous. "Let me go to Pike," he said. "Let me speak to my father." The Greyjoy fleet could crush the West. Robb hesitated. "You're not a messenger." "I'm his son," Theon replied. "He'll listen to me," Jon stepped in. "Or he'll use you." Theon turned on him. "You think I'll betray you?" Jon stared cold. "I think you're already torn in half." Robb looked between them, then finally nodded. "You go. But if you don't return with banners raised for the North, don't return at all." And with that, Theon left, riding east, chasing a name that was already fading behind him. As winter deepened, so did the war. Robb's victories continued, swift, brutal, precise. But every battle carved a deeper scar on his soul. Then the worst blow came. A raven from King's Landing. Sansa Stark was to be married to Joffrey. A northern hostage in a southern cage. Robb crushed the scroll in his hand. "They want to spit on every Stark bone." Jon stepped forward. "Then we hit them harder. No mercy, no more waiting." That night, they planned their boldest move yet. To strike Harrenhal, Tywin's fortress of fear. A direct message. The North does not kneel. Not for kings, not for crowns. As the men gathered their gear, a storm rolled in. Black clouds, icy wind, thunder shaking the sky. Robb looked out into the rain. "Tell them," he said to Jon, "the storm is ours now." And as the thunder cracked above them, the army of the North rode into the night. The storm followed them like a shadow. Rain hammered the iron armor of 30,000 northern soldiers as they marched for Harrenhal, that cursed, blackened ruin where Tywin Lannister had dug in like a spider in its web. The lightning above flashed like war drums of the old gods. Mud swallowed boots. The men were cold, hungry, tired, but their eyes burned with purpose. Robb Stark rode at the front, face hardened like the steel he carried. Beside him, Jon Snow's cloak flapped in the wind, black as the night, his direwolf ghost padding silently behind him. These were not boys anymore. They had seen fire, betrayal, death, and now they carried it with them. But Harrenhal was not what they expected. When they reached its twisted gates, they found nothing but ashes. Fires still smoldered. The smell of rot clung to the air. Every wall scorched. Bodies lined the towers. Some northern scouts, some river lords, some innocent. But no Lannisters. "They're gone," Robb muttered, dismounting. Jon knelt beside a fallen man. This was a message. A whisper rode on the wind. "You're too late." Inside the great hall of Harrenhal, Robb found a table, and upon it, his father's sword, ice, shattered into pieces. A mockery, a warning. Jon stepped closer. "They knew we were coming. They want us angry," Robb said, his voice like ice. "They want us to lose control." "And what if we do?" Jon asked, gripping his hilt. "What if we show them the North doesn't fear fire? We return it." Robb turned slowly. "We will, but we strike smarter than them." But then came the raven. This time, it wasn't Lannister words. It bore the seal of Pike. Balon Greyjoy had declared himself king. The Iron Islands had risen. Theon Greyjoy, once brother, now Trunklok, had taken Winterfell. Robb stood frozen. The hall fell silent. Jon stared at the raven, unable to speak. It was more than betrayal. It was heartbreak. "He was our brother," Robb whispered. "No," Jon said darkly. "He wore our colors, ate our food, slept under our roof. But he never bled with us." Rage boiled in Robb's chest. He will. They turned the army north. But the damage was done. In the time they'd been fighting lions, a kraken had stabbed them in the back. Along the way, Jon had dreams. Dark dreams of shadows rising beyond the wall, of cold whispers in the night. He didn't speak of them to Robb, not yet. But he knew. Their fight was just a piece of something bigger. As they neared Winterfell, they found it burning. The castle gates broken, towers fallen. Dead Starks and dead Ironborn scattered like leaves. Theon was gone, fled, a coward with no crown, no kingdom, only blood on his hands. Robb walked the halls in silence. Ghost prowled through the rubble. Jon knelt in the crypts beneath the broken castle, whispering a silent promise to their father's stone. "I failed," Robb said to Jon as they stood among the ashes. "No," Jon replied. "We're still standing. That's how we win." But the war had taken everything. The crown sat heavy on Robb's head. He no longer smiled. The banners of the north flew high again, but behind them stood only loss. Then came the final raven, a message from Catelyn, who had reached River Run. Arya was missing. Sansa was still a prisoner. And war was coming from the east. A dragon's war. Robb looked at Jon. "It never ends, does it?" "No," Jon said, "but neither do we." Robb placed a hand on Jon's shoulder. "Swear it," he said. "If I fall, if the south breaks me, you carry the north. You protect the blood. You carry the fire." Jon stared at him, then nodded once. "I swear it." And as snow began to fall again over Winterfell's ruins, two brothers stood in the cold, not broken, not defeated, but ready. The war had changed. The board was wider now. Dragons stirred in the east. Darkness rose in the north. And in between stood two wolves, forged in fire and betrayal, bound by blood and vengeance. This was no longer just about thrones. It was about survival. The North remembers.